Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Syngenta Canada, Alberta Wheat Commission, and C&M Seeds.
Alright, so we're joined here on RealAgriculture.com now by Rex Newkirk, the Vice President of Research and Innovation here at CIGI, the Canadian International Grains Institute in Winnipeg. It's actually Portage in Maine, downtown, the heart of Winnipeg, through the window behind Rex here. Maybe explain where we're at, this room we're in here.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Calvin. This is our analytical services area, and this is where we do all the testing on wheat from either deliveries that are being made to customers or on the new crop. So right now what they're doing is they're analyzing samples of wheat that we've collected from grain elevators across the prairies to understand what the quality is that the customers can expect this year. And so they're working away. We have new crop missions ongoing right now, speaking to customers based on data we've already generated and just getting as much information as possible to help those customers.
So we're here to talk about CPS wheat today, and if you go back 2 years, say 2012, there was lots of talk about opportunities and growth in CPS production in Western Canada. Maybe just to kind of set the stage here, what is CPS wheat and how is it different from CWRS?
That's a really good question, Kelvin. The CPS is a class that allows us to bring in varieties that don't quite meet that premium class of CWRS. And so Canada has a reputation for having a very consistent product in CWRS, Canadian Western Red Spring wheat, and we have, I think, the best wheat in the world because of that. But sometimes you want to be able to bring in varieties that are a little bit broader than that maybe don't meet some of the same specifications, a little bit lower protein typically. So if you have a variety that looks like it'll work really well for producers, but has a little lower protein, then it would typically fall into what we call a CPS class. And that's not to say it's a lower quality class, it's a lower protein class. And with lower protein, it brings lower water absorption, a few things like that. So some of our customers around the world, they have to have very high protein. And then that, for them, CWRS is their option. But CPS is for clients that can use a little bit lower protein, but still looking for an excellent wheat to bring up the quality of the wheat they have available from other parts around the world. So still, one of the best wheats in the world is the lower protein wheat.
So it's not, like I know there's lots of talk about growing lower quality and higher yielding varieties. You're saying that's not necessarily the case, this is just different, not necessarily lower quality.
Exactly, yeah. So unfortunately, they keep classifying, this higher yielding, lower quality, and it's not that at all. Yes, it's higher yielding, but it's not lower quality. The quality parameters from a baking perspective stuff is excellent and still among the best in the world. It's just lower protein. And so since so much wheat is traded on a protein basis, oftentimes they equate lower protein with lower quality, but that's not true. This is a premium wheat where you can use something that's 11.5 or 12% protein. Whereas for many of our flour mills, when they sell their flour, the bakeries specify we must have certain protein level. Unless you use CWRS and some other high protein wheats, you can't meet that requirement. On the other hand, we have customers that can use lower protein wheat, and that CPS works for them perfectly. South America would be a good example. Many of our Latin American customers, they treasure CPS. It brings in very good extraction, meaning you get lots of really good high quality flour out of it. It's a little bit lower water absorption, so you don't put as much water into it. Because it's lower protein, maybe a little bit lower volume of the loaf, but that's okay. For the type of products they're making, CPS fits them perfectly, and they're often asking for more CPS.
So along those lines then, it's well, the first year, if you go back 2 years, there was a big jump in CPS production in Western Canada. It's not, the final numbers aren't in yet for this year, so it's unclear whether marketing factors, how they've impacted that. But what do you see for opportunities in terms of growth in CPS?
Well, we certainly see customers that want the stuff, there's no doubt. But at the same time, we also know we've got some logistical constraints. Companies have to focus on the material they have to sell. And so I think when there was change in the marketing structure and everything else, that there was a lot of hope that, hey, maybe the CPS would really take off gangbusters because farmers like growing it. But the truth be told, you still have to be able to move the stuff to customers. You've got to, make bin space. You got to fill up all those rail cars and keep the system working. And it's been a challenge. I think people are finding it hard to maybe put the focus in on the CPS that that maybe customers would like to see it have. And it's because of the volume available, the volume of transportation we have available. And so I think the companies are trying to do the best they can for farmers and move the product that's going to bring the farmers the most money, and right now that's CWRS. So CWRS has really continued to be sort of our top class. Customers know it, they love it. We produce lots of it. CPS, I think, has taken a bit of a downward slide at the moment, but we have some excellent varieties. We have customers that want it. So, and assuming we get some sort of logistical issues out of the way, I could see CPS taking a much greater portion of the acres in the future. Whether that'll take away from CWRS or that just means expanding our wheat acreage, because the truth be told, we have a very strong base for our CWRS and people love it. But we have some customers that would really like to get their hands on more CPS. So I think we could see an increase in acreage of the CPS without having to necessarily take away from the CWRS acres.
But you're saying it's likely due to other factors now that we've seen some of this talk maybe plateau over the last year about CPS. It's not necessarily about, or demand isn't the problem, there's still lots of demand.
No, the demand is there. No, we absolutely have the demand. But I think people just have to put priorities on what do they have to move, and especially as far as logistics goes, capacity at the elevators, at the terminal elevators, ports, and so they have to make priority setting. And unfortunately, I don't think CPS has necessarily had the ability to make that top priority.
So you mentioned South America customers, they tend to prefer, or they really like CPS. What is it about CPS varieties that is producing in them?
They like the high flower extraction. It makes a very nice flour, very high extraction. It fits into sort of a little bit lower protein category, so it tends to come at a little bit lower price. So they obviously like lower price, but it fits well with what they're trying to make for their products. A lot of the baked products they're making are not big, high, low volume like we'd have in Asia or some of our other clients. They're looking for materials that don't need to have as much volume, and therefore the lower protein is fine. So they can get a little bit cheaper, but it also brings in excellent strength and it can blend well with wheat they can get from locally or other sources that are on that same protein band. So they really like it when they can get their hands on it. Often in new crop missions they're saying, how can we get more of this? And we're saying, well, it's got to move in lockstep with the whole system. So, and unfortunately that lockstep sometimes is just slower coming than we want it to be.
How about the European market? Do we sell CPS in Europe?
No, we don't. In Europe, they grow an awful lot of wheat that is a little bit lower protein along the lines of a CPS, not as high quality as their CPS, not as strong, not as consistent. But so they grow lots of it. And the governments there want to protect that market. And their way to protect that market is to put tariffs in place on anything that sort of could compete with it directly. So we're able to get very high protein wheat into, say, for example, England. We can bring in high protein wheat quite readily without these huge tariffs, but they only allow small amounts of the lower protein stuff to come into Europe. Otherwise, they could compete with their domestic market. And so CPS would compete head on with their domestic materials, a higher quality, but it would compete at a protein level. So no, I think Europe and parts of Asia, as far as bread market goes, are out as well, because a number of our clients around the world in Asia need very high protein in order to sell that flour to their bakers. Where CPS does go into Asia, though, is noodles. It makes excellent noodles. Makes a very nice bright noodle. Lots of extensibility. They like the texture that it gives the noodles. I know my Asian products fellow, anytime he can look at new varieties of CPS, he's quite excited because he likes what it brings to the noodles. And so it has some very good potential in the noodle market as well.
So lots of things for farmers to keep in mind when choosing the wheat varieties.
Lots of stuff to keep in mind, but of course, it comes down to, in the end, what's going to give them the greatest return. And if the signals are that they're going to make more money on a CWRS that's a little lower yielding, then they have to go with that. If they're getting signals that the price is suitable given the yield you're going to get, then you can go with it. So it really comes down to dollars and cents in the end, and everybody in the system's trying to figure out how do you get the most bang out of the buck going elsewhere. And so I think if we can get the logistics stuff out, I think we're going to see a lot more CPS in the future going into some of these markets.